Good afternoon, everybody. It's around about 1:10. I apologise, we've had a few technical difficulties which have delayed the start of this meeting, but it's 1:10, and so I'll declare the meeting open and welcome everybody present, both in the room and online. If I can move to agenda item 1, excuse me. So I call for apologies. I have received notice of apology from Mayor Kircher and Deputy Mayor Halali today, and so I'd like that noted, but just wish to also ask, given those two members missing, whether there are any other members that need to leave prior to 3 p.m. today. We may not have a quorum. Okay, so not doing that. Yep. So I was just getting there. So on that basis, if I could please have a mover and a seconder to accept the apologies. Mover, Councillor Blackler, accepted by Councillor McCone. Thank you very much. So I'll put that motion to the meeting. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Moving on now to agenda item 2. Just asking, are there any declarations of interest? If not, then we will move on to agenda item 3, which is confirmation of the previous minutes. Moved? Yeah. Any seconded? Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Ryan. Any conversation before I put it to motion? That's a no. Excellent, thank you. So all those in favour, aye. Against? Motion carried. Very much. We'll now move to agenda item 4, which is audit proposal for the 2022-2023 annual report. Mr. Palmley, did you want to open up on that at all before I pass to Mr. Hope? Then, Mr. Hope, I'll allow you to please introduce the agenda item.
Thank you. So, yeah, this is a rather unusual item and one where perhaps, disappointed to be the right word that we have to bring before you. Usually, this is a reasonably mechanical process that Audit New Zealand, who is the appointed auditor for the Waitaki District Council by the Office of the Auditor General, presents a fee proposal for sort of a 3-year period, sort of go between really framed around the LTP cycle. This year, we received this letter reasonably late in the process, or very late in the process, and as discussed in the report, the proposed fees were significantly higher than expectations, and that there was a very significant increase across the 3-year period. We have been trying to come to an agreed position with Audit New Zealand. We have not been able to do that. Therefore, we're sort of needed to come to you with an alternate approach, particularly in terms of the audit for the 2023 financial year end. So that's why you're seeing the recommendation that you have in the report. It's we haven't really been able to make much progress in terms of the fee or develop a better understanding of the hours or why this matter has come to us so late. So what we're really proposing is to just try and get a 1-year agreement in terms of the coming year, and then allow us further time to negotiate the 24 and 25 years. I think it would also, this is likely to have a pretty material impact on the fee that we are likely to be charged for the long-term plan audit, which is in addition to this. So, we are across this 3-year period talking about a significant change and a significant amount of money that we are really struggling to see the value it provides to the community. It is, no one, I don't think anyone argues about the need to have an audit of the annual report. It is a important financial statement and an important accountability document to the community, but it should be fit for purpose and deliver value to the community rather than just a significant cost with quite a limited value. So really just wanting to get the committee's endorsement and then move it through to council to take I suppose an unconventional approach, but really focus on getting an agreement in for the coming year. We didn't cover, I think it's, how long this takes. I think that the auditors will, although they have undertaken the interim work for the year end, for the annual report audit, probably won't get a lot of physical work on the year end started until an agreement is placed. So I think it will potentially place the council at risk of having the audit opinion issued after the deadline of 31 October. So it's just a risk we're bringing to your attention and really want to having a discussion on. So that's my rather lengthy introduction. This is a matter that the chair of committee, the chief executive, the CFO, myself, and now the mayor and the deputy mayor have all been involved with. So it's certainly a matter that's gotten all of our attention. So really happy to answer questions. Amanda I'm not sure if you want to add anything at this stage, or just perhaps answer some of the more specific questions if they arise. So
yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. So I was just going to just to quantify that, what's being proposed currently in the 3-year letter is a circa 80% increase in fees that equates to around about $140,000 of increase over the 3-year period, set up in a series of tranches. We've worked to try and come up with an alternative 1-year agreement. And Amanda, I just wondered if you wanted to, do you want to just briefly describe the mechanics behind it? So the budget increase that we've got, and then why we're proposing that, the figure that we're proposing of 213.
Yep. So you may recall in the annual plan budget, we increased the audit fee from 209 up to 213 to reflect a further inflationary increase that we're expecting than what we expected back when we set the LTP a couple of years ago. So we thought we had already increased the fee significantly from 178 in the prior year, 2022, up to we're proposing 213, which was 17% increase. So that was the level that we were wanting to kind of stand at. So we have talked to the appointed auditor, and there's the line in their audit fee titled transitional adjustment. So he had said there is room to move that adjustment. So they'd proposed a net audit fee of 271 less the transitional adjustment of 40, which reaches the adjusted fee of 253, including the OAG charge. So we're proposing that transitional adjustment be up to 80k for this year. So that's not such a huge increase, 77%.
Thank you. So any questions from councillors or points for discussion? Councillor McCone.
I'd just like to make the comment, doing some rough sums, that's $197.50 an hour as a charge out rate. So do we challenge what they're offering, and do we challenge them to put in their hourly rates of what they're actually charging us for, rather than come to us and say, this is what it's going to cost? Can we go back to them and have them on?
Yeah, that's certainly the process that we're going through at the moment. We're questioning the total hours, the mix of hours, and then so the fee that ends up as a result of that is highlighted in the report. It's not only a significant change of cost, it's a significant change of hours, which we are really, I think that's probably the thing that we're struggling the most with, given that last year it was, they accepted and fully acknowledged that they were really struggling to staff the audits. That's why ours was delayed a couple of times. It wasn't issued until effectively the end of May. There was a lot of staff turnover on their side because, essentially the people that started the audit weren't the people that did the work in the middle and certainly weren't the ones that finished it at the end. So that seemed to us an inherently very inefficient way to undertake the audit, and it was just the circumstances at the time. But to see those sort of hours under those circumstances not increased, not reduced, is something we have not been able to get, in our view, a satisfactory answer as to why there is that kind of increase and then that flowing into the fee calculation.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair reflection. So we're not so much challenging the hourly rate. You mentioned an average figure of $197, but obviously for the audit lead, it's a significantly higher hourly rate than that. And for some of the others that are working on it, it's a lower rate than that. So what we're challenging is the number of hours, recognising that there were some inefficiencies on both sides, and trying to work towards a resolution for that going forward. So one of the things that I've specifically requested of Audit New Zealand is to sit down with them and work through what we could do from the council end to increase our effectiveness and our operational efficiency as much as possible. So what could we do to get those hours down to something that's more palatable for us as an entity? And to that effect, that's why the recommendations are reflected the way that they are. We're saying, look, we can sign up to this for the first year, but we actually need to do a lot of work with you to try and understand how we can make this a more palatable solution and a more cost-effective solution going forward for the longer term. Because to Mr. Hope's opening remark, and also Mr. Parmley's remarks in some meetings that we've had with them, we all recognise the importance of an independent external audit and the value that has to the organisation. It's just this value seems a little excessive. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I agree. I mean, if you look at even that 213,000 figure or $213,010 figure, that's $639,000 over the term of this council. That's $639,030. That doesn't include any of some presumed increases in years 2 and 3. I suppose my question to us is, are we satisfied that we've been tough enough? I mean, you look at the 2022 annual actual, as Amanda has pointed out, 178.5. We're relatively happily, or at least willing to propose a $34,510 increase. I mean, could we have even been a bit tougher with them at the moment? Or do you think this is as far as we could have pushed the boat out?
Would you like to speak to the rationale behind the increase in budget for this year, and maybe that will help understandings?
So the Auditor General wrote to all the councils around New Zealand to outline that the fees were going to increase significantly. So the actual 178 that was spent in 2022, there was a lot of extra hours that they didn't bill for. So some inefficiencies on our part and a lot on their part. So it's recognising that they couldn't actually do the audit for $178,000. So we were thinking, like, we were expecting higher than inflation because that had been signalled by the Auditor General, but yeah, not to this extent.
I can absolutely confirm that the executive team have been having some pretty tough conversations with Audit New Zealand around the fees and the breakdown of the fees. And one of the things that we are definitely going to do over the course of the next audit is to ask for regular updates on hours, on time spent, on where inefficiencies have occurred and where we can create things. But I am relatively comfortable supporting that $213,000 figure as being something that what we think would be reflective of the cost of the audit. Councillor McKone.
Just, I suppose, more information. What does it cost this entity to get those books and help the audit department go? So what I'm trying to ask is, what is the total cost of the whole audit system, including their bill?
Are you asking what our internal costs are associated with the audit as well? I don't. We could take an action to kind of try and pull some numbers together on that, well, based on percentage of staff's time and cost. But at this stage, I don't think we could provide you with a figure that we would be confident with.
No, I couldn't provide you a figure. I mean, it's to give you an idea of the effort that we put into it. It's probably about 3 people full time for about 4 months, plus significant input from right around the council, because the annual report isn't just the financial numbers, it's all the non-financial performance. It's talking about the activity. It's it's a lengthy document that needs to be prepared and proofread and then formatted and published. So it's, but in terms of, you can certainly speak in terms of the finance staff, that's ignoring the work we do during the year to get it into place. But it is pretty much a full-time, the full focus of about 3 people's attention while it's being prepared.
I suppose that's what I'm asking is, to me, if that's the case with what audit's asking for, they're not taking into consideration what the actual cost is to present that information. And I think they're being a bit cheeky in their outlook.
Well, I think the fee that Audit New Zealand's charging us is the fee for their time. And so it's intended to be reflective of the time that they spent on it, and the cost to the council for their time is just something that's historically always just been absorbed and will continue to have to be.
Yeah, and I mean they're just a contractor. It's the Office of the Auditor General is the one that sets the standards, sets the process. Every year adds additional work into the audit to answer questions that they're particularly interested in, or that they think Parliament may be interested in, but are not core to the opinion being issued on the annual report. So again, yet we are expected to pay for that as part of the audit fee. And which in the past it's like, well, okay, it's fair enough. And there was also, I think, in the past been more of a recognition that the audit fee has a really disproportionate impact. The smaller the council, the more of the impact the fee has, because the work for us or for McKinsey to prepare an annual report is not significantly different than a TA perhaps 4 or 5 times our size. It's not until you get into a major metro with very complicated financial arrangements and that it really sort of takes a quantum leap. But probably our fee is about the same as or less than like Timaru or Nelson City, or probably even up to places like Napier and Hastings, and it's just an annual report is an annual report. It doesn't matter you've got a 50 million or 250 million. It's about the same amount of work to produce it and to audit it. And it's just, there used to be more of an equalisation and recognition of that, but that seems to have been disappearing.
So also just picking up on Mr. Hope's remark earlier that Audit New Zealand is effectively a contractor who's contracted to provide a service, and the level of that service is set by the Auditor General of New Zealand. And Mr. Palmer, you and many other councils have signed your name to a letter going to the Auditor General, and also continuing to follow up with the Auditor General on some of their strategic drivers behind what they're doing, I guess. So we are looking at this from every angle that we can. We're saying, we can agree to a 1-year fee, and the 1-year fee can be this, and then we want to work really closely with you to understand what's going on. We're also working at a strategic level with fellow councils to try and get a better understanding of what the drivers are behind the Auditor General's requirements and whether we think that they're reasonable or not. And we're working to try and determine what efficiencies we as a council can put in place to reduce the number of the volume of hours that are being charged to us by the contractor And we'll continue to work on that. Councillor Ryan, did you have a question?
It was actually sort of what you just covered around collective action. I was just interested in what it looked like. So that's pretty much been covered. Yeah.
Councillor Blackler. Did you want to reply to that, Mr. Palmer?
Yeah, I'll just say a bit more about that. Prior to this letter arriving, I think we were amongst a group of predominantly Canterbury councils who've had concerns about audit and the audit process and the value it adds to our organisations and our communities, and preface that again by saying the role of audit is really important, and it should be giving you as governance and our community and ratepayers the assurances around value for money and the security of how we use our funds as an organisation. The Canterbury Chief Execs have met with representatives of Audit New Zealand and the Office of the Auditor General to discuss these concerns, but felt that we haven't really made much progress. And then predominantly Canterbury councils, including ourselves, who are split between Canterbury and Otago, have received significant increases in our fees as well. I don't know whether that's reward for our engagements with them. And it doesn't seem to be the case so much across Otago councils. I think a number of Otago councils don't have Audit New Zealand as their auditors. So there is collective action that we're taking, but we've also had direct engagement. So the Office of the Auditor General has reached out to myself to understand concerns. I feel like, in the meeting that myself and the chair attended with Audit New Zealand, that we didn't really get an understanding of why the fees were increasing, what the basis was for that. And we raised concerns that, we weren't getting sufficient value out of our audit as we wanted previously, and there was no added value from the increased fees. So the Office of the Auditor General is aware of our concerns, and hopefully that'll be backed up by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor in terms of their meeting, which I think is proposed with the Office of the Auditor General as well. So we need to get those assurances that we are getting value for you as the governance team and for our ratepayers.
Thank you, Councillor Blackler, and we'll move on.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand, so this time round when we're getting regular updates around resourcing and allocations and such like, would we be coming to some sort of mutual agreement around writing off hours that seem an unreasonable amount in terms of reconciling the effort that's put in as to like a reasonable amount of hours that would be expected on various tasks? And then I'd just like to also understand around the other options, what would the process actually look like in a practical sense around seeking to use a non-Office of the Auditor General auditor?
Mr. Hope.
I think first one, I think understanding the hours, I think it will be useful for this year, but it's going to be far more useful in terms of the following years, so that we've got a really good understanding of where we can, what a reasonable fee is, what actions we can take to improve the effectiveness of their time. They've raised issues in the past, and we believe that we had addressed a lot of those to actually improve the effectiveness of the audit. Because in the past, I think we've acknowledged in these committees and with the auditors that sometimes we have caused delays and inefficiencies, and that's why we sort of accepted additional fees in the last few years. But we had taken steps to try and address a lot of those issues. So I think it's probably won't have too much of an impact on the fee in this year, but it certainly will for the years going ahead. It's like, what's the most efficient approach from both sides, and understanding that. In terms of the other options, like they're just, we haven't done a lot of work on those, because I think that if we have to follow any of those actions, like finding another auditor, the opinion will be very late, because we're only about 2 weeks away from supposedly the start of the audit process. So trying to find another auditor now would be exceptionally challenging. And that's why, we'd probably come back to you about if we're not successful in the approach that's recommended. And Mr. Palmer has something else.
So I just wanted to clarify, my understanding is that even if we wanted to find another auditor ourselves, we don't have the power to do that at the moment. And that's part of the representation of the Canterbury councils, that, there should be a more competitive process in which perhaps there's a panel of auditors that, councils can go to rather than being given a, particular auditor. So I think that would be an issue to address, as being given, dispensation to be able to go and get our own auditor in the first place.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins, conscious of
Yeah,
time.
Mr. Chair, that's exactly. With your permission, I'd like to move the recommendation, starting with the words that the Performance Audit and Risk Committee and ending with the words appointed auditor.
Excellent. Thank you very much for moving that. Can I have a seconder, please? And are there any discussions on the motion? Sorry, Councillor McCone. Apologies. All those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Thank you very much. We will continue to work on your behalves on that. So moving on now to agenda item 5, financial report for Q4 2023. Mr. Hope, Mr. Nichols, who would like to speak to this?
I'm going to let Ms. Nichols do most of the talking on this one. She's spent the last few months getting up to speed and asking a lot of questions herself to understand what the hell happened over the last 12 months. But yeah, it is, looking at 12 months and reflecting on, some pretty significant variances from budget, to be honest. And then I think, we've come up with a lot of individual explanations, but the biggest one is that, when we set these budgets effectively, February, to get the year right, 2022, the world has changed quite a bit since then. We've suffered, really first period of really sustained high level inflation over that period. Seen, significant movements in the cost of finance, which is another driver we had. So we've really just had to absorb an awful lot of costs. And very nature of councils that we can't really adjust our revenue to match those costs, because we set our largest revenue source at a point in time. So we have tried to control the items where we can and try and compensate for it, but we have ended up where we are. So with that gloomy introduction, I'll now flick over to Amanda to perhaps make a couple of comments, but I think the primary value is in a bit of Q&A about what you're looking at and what actions we've really taken to try and avoid similar situations going forward. So over to you, Amanda.
So I'd just like to stress that these are draft results. The finance team's still pulling everything together. We've got roading valuation that's still got to hit the books, affects the balance sheet a wee bit. And also, as we finalise our CapEx and expenditure split, so some things may move to the balance sheet and affect the bottom line slightly. So we talk about a $10.1 million deficit in this paper, but even since that time, it's slipped a wee bit under 10 mil, so it's improving. So the audit is due to start on the 18th of September, presuming we can agree fees. So we're working towards those dates. So obviously, Paul's touched on the reasons for the increase in expenditure. There's also the other side of that, there's lower revenue, but that's pretty much just due to the timing of the Sports and Event Centre not receiving that 7.7 million of grants and donations in relation to that. So that's a timing difference. And higher expenditure, you can see that across the board due to inflationary increases. A lot of pressure on staff, supply shortages, the emergency flooding work at the start of the financial year put us back behind in roading. And then a lot of extra work we're doing around transformation in the district plan. So there's a lot of detailed variance explanations there. I have had a request to provide more detailed information about consultants and contractors. So that will come at some point. In terms of the balance sheet, we've got to book the roading valuation, which will make a significant increase. But it's pretty much as budgeted. There's a big increase, a 1.95 increase in the lending to other entities due to the extra lending to Waitaki District Health Services. And then there's variances to budget in terms of the cash balance, and the other side of that is the borrowings. So that's just about holding an extra 4 mil in cash. So we borrowed that down, and it's still sitting in the bank account. We haven't actually used it at 30 June. So they kind of net off. And then in terms of CapEx, you can see the big variances there. Parks and Recs, obviously we haven't made the sports and event centre in the financial year that we expected. So that's getting deferred. And the huge one there, Waters, had a very ambitious budget, 35 million against a spend of 10. But just to recognise that the total spend of 10 million is in line with what they spent last year. So we're still spending the same sort of level, but they were a very ambitious budget there.
Thank you. So I'll open the floor up to questions. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I have a number, obviously, and I suspect other members will as well. Just trying to get a clear understanding of the explanation we've had with the 15 million variation. When we look at the next page, and some of those, that's page 28 of this report, there are things in here that I am puzzled by. Clearly, the dividend figure is disappointing. I mean, more than disappointing, it's unacceptable in my view. Now that we have our own, this 226 is Whitestone's dividend payment made, is it on July 1 or whatever? Sorry, all the arguments for having them as a contractor just disappear unless they can actually significantly increase that. Other expenses, that's an extraordinarily vague term for an area where there's been a $9 million cost blowout, or 8,402,000.
Sorry, just on that, Councillor Hopkins, there is a great breakdown of that on page 29.
Well, I did have a look at that, but I didn't. I hadn't seen the. Oh yes, I've got that. Well, yeah, other expenses are 8.4 over budget and 11.7 higher than last year due to a variety of reasons, including inflationary pressure staff. I mean, you might say that that's an adequate explanation. I'm not absolutely sure that it is.
No, apologies. I'm referring to the table further down that page, which shows a breakdown of.
Oh, I've got you.
Various line items.
Yes, yeah. No, sorry, you're quite right. I accept that. No, I just withdraw that. The other question I had, I'm just trying to find. Sorry, there's a couple of references that absolutely puzzled me. Oh yes, if we look at back to page 28, there's a reference in the third paragraph under key variances. The variance of the prior year is due to receiving 5.8 million higher roading subsidies from Waka Kotahi this year, offset by the 4.7 million DIA affordable water funding. Well, surely it would have been added to because we got that 4.7 million. Or are you talking about the stuff we didn't get from tranche 2?
I've shared my words. It might be not receiving, missing a word there, due to not receiving the 5.8. Sorry, I have to double check that one.
No, so we got the 4.7 the year before in affordable water funding. So it's like the two numbers are distorted. One was sort of had an extra 4.7 in it, and then this year we had an extra 5.8. So it's been a surprisingly volatile number across the 2 years that's making comparison difficult.
If I may, on page 30, there's a reference at the top to the consultant's costs in relation to the district plan and transformation were not incurred in the prior year. Now, sorry, we've had a loan to fund the district plan in place for years now, and in theory, money was drawn down as required on an ongoing basis. So how can it possibly be that a whole year's work wasn't charged for? That makes no sense to me.
I'm going to ask Mr. Hope, or Ms. Nichols, if they can answer that.
No, sorry, what it's trying to say is that we significantly increased the spending on consultants on the district plan. Yeah, we have been spending it. We still need to incur that cost. It is funded by way of loan. It's just, the level of consultant input at this stage of the district plan has increased compared to the prior years. So it was sort of at a steady state, but now that we're getting, doing the things like the checking of the document and the referencing of all the chapters and some of the more detailed work that has, as was noted this morning, it's the churn in the district plan space on a monthly basis now is very significant.
Okay, so it's more a grammatical issue. It's not that there were no costs
Yes,
incurred. It's just the significant costs this year weren't incurred the previous year.
So look, just staying on that page, costs have increased by 5 million. This is talking largely in the 3 waters and roading areas. Costs have increased by 5 million from last year and are 2 million over what was budgeted. And yet, if we look at the next page, I think, sorry, the page after that, page 32, Waters had a budget of 35,119,000 and only spent 10,123. Roading had a budget of 13,401,000. Now, I know we pulled some pin on some of the water projects, so that explains some of that variance, but Roading had a budget of 13,401 and only spent 8,610. And yet we're still saying, with substantial underspends, that things were $5 million and $2 million over budget. Something is radically wrong, and we don't have formulas or mechanisms to address it in a timely manner, in my view.
So the spend on the earlier page is talking about repairs and maintenance type work expenditure. And then the page 32 is what's been capitalised.
Oh, okay.
So they're completely different projects.
Right. Okay.
Two different variances.
Thank you. Any other feedback?
No.
Councillor McKone.
Yeah, on page, I'm sorry, now I've lost it, page 35, I think it is. Yes. Up the top, I'm presuming that's an operation budget as such, so we're worth 47.5 million and we have 42.5 million borrowings, giving us a net of 5 million cash. Is that how that works? Because, and then, but we
It's next item, John.
is it?
Yeah.
I'm one ahead of yourself,
Yes.
sorry.
Racing ahead there, we'll get on to 5 points. You're on to 5 in a minute.
Well, the other question I do have is the $5.5 million blowout in contractors, and do we not have fixed rates for these guys? So we seem to, if I do a contract for you and it's 100 grand, you'll get a bill for 100 grand. If it costs me 120, that's my bad. If it costs me 80, then that's my benefit. That's almost another quarter again of what our total budget is, and it's I don't accept it. And also, as far as consultants goes, well, everybody knows my view on those. Use local people who know local stuff, and you'll actually probably get a better answer. That's just a comment. It seems a hell of a waste of money. It's another $1.5 million consultants.
Depends what you call local, just to be. There are almost no local consultants. So local for us is Christchurch and Dunedin. And they are as familiar with the district as I think anyone that would be based here locally. Yeah. The contracting line, we have the contracts in place, but they also have, because I think the shortest one is a 3-year contract. Most of them are between 3 and 5. they have built in CPI adjustments into all of those contracts. So that includes the roading maintenance, which obviously were renewed, and it was slightly more expensive. Certainly anything in the Three Waters space, the parks contract, and a lot of the others. And so they've had escalations. I think the smallest was sort of an 8% CPI, and some of those were significantly higher than that. So that's why you're seeing the big increase there. And then a lot of that contract, as Amanda highlighted, there is still a wee bit of analysis to do between some costs are recognised and fall into the sort of the maintenance contract space, and then analysed out depending on the nature of the expenditure. So whether sometimes it's a renewal project where there's a mix of capital and maintenance in it. So we're still doing a wee bit of that analysis. But yeah, it's just, and we've had to take on more work that has been in maintenance in nature. I know we've certainly done some of the work around the sewer reticulation ponds. Some of that work, it doesn't actually add to the value of the asset. It's essentially a major repair work that is not capitalised, so it appears as a contractor cost rather than a capitalised project. So, as you said, we have had a question about providing a bit more detail on that, and we will provide that at a subsequent meeting.
Is that a supplementary?
Mr. Marley's.
I just want to say something on the consultant spend, and I've said some of this before that I know we don't like consultant spend, and consultant spend doesn't go down well out there with the community, but there are some things that we do where we either can't recruit the skills here to be able to do them, or it's not economic for us to have the skills. So we need a bit of someone, part of the time, who's got skills that are very expensive, and if we had them all the time, then we wouldn't be able to afford that, or it would stop us doing other things. So the real way, if you want to reduce the consultant's budget, is to do less. So Kakanui Bridge, we need consultants to do that. So let's not do that. Or a lot of our water schemes, we need some expert skills that we don't have in-house to upgrade those water schemes. So I think the way, if you really want to reduce the consultant spend, is analyse where the consultants are needed and do less out there in the community of those things where we haven't got the skills internally. Simply, we do need to keep a tight control on consultant spend, but we do need consultants. And this is a hard message to get across to our community. There are some things we need to do if we're going to deliver on what they want, that we just simply don't have the skills or couldn't afford to have the skills on our payroll.
Yeah, I'm conscious there's a couple of other questions lined up, but you've got a supplementary there, Councillor McKay.
Alex and I'll agree to disagree on that. We haven't got time to go.
We have committed to coming back to a future meeting with a much more detailed breakdown of consultants and contractors. But I think, Alex raises a good point. There's just some skill sets that don't live in Oamaru that you have to get in.
My other supplementary to all that is with this overrun and everything else, is there an opportunity of payback, or is that going to be lumped on the ratepayers for the next rate take with the overrun on their services?
I mean, the biggest overrun in the contract, so I should have remembered about this, was the work that we undertook in the addressing the flood damage, both primarily on the roading network and then on 800. And so we had been recovered. We've had the subsidy in relation to that. There's still a piece that council needs to absorb. And no, I mean, most of these, they are ending up, a good portion of it is rate funded in one way or another. So we will need to recover it from the ratepayer.
And I think it's something with the volatile climate that we're going to see increasingly more frequently. We'll have to.
Yeah, and so I mean
that's
going to be like one of the major discussion points we have through this LTP process. It's about how much are we trying to mitigate the issues before it happens. So essentially resilient spend versus having a greater allowance. As Councillor Hopkins raised this morning, it's like, well, coastal erosion, do we need to have a bigger budget to allow for that? Or do we stay in a mainly reactive space where we set what we think are realistic budgets, we respond and then recover it post the event rather than having a contingency available at the start. So it's a pretty philosophical discussion about what position the council wants to take in terms of when do we take the money from the community and how much is it trying to prevent something happening or repair it at the end. Or in some cases, it's actually we're just going to live with it. And if the asset deteriorates, then we live with a deteriorated asset because we may not be able to afford to do everything that we want. Well, we can't afford to do everything we want but it's like, there might be some hard choices about specific assets that we say actually it's served its useful life and we can actually live without it.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
You sort of already touched on my question, which was around Ms. Nichols mentioned that there would be a further breakdown of contractor and consultant costs. So that will come back before PAR, or do you know?
Yes, we'll bring it back to PAR. Thank you. Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. Totally support the comments around the need for consultants. It's at various points, but I just wanted to understand why we didn't anticipate such a stark increase in that space. Is it primarily around additional information required as part of the district plan process, or is it to fill internal lack of capacity to deliver things? And the second question is, there was a comment around personnel costs in item number 6, I think it was, or note number 6. I just wanted to understand what our current vacancy rate is, and how much is the vacancy rate offsetting the recoveries from capital that haven't been kind of transferred, and then further to the recovery from capital type projects that will impact that personnel costs section in time as the transition happens into the new water entity. Will those aspects that are kind of in the kind of interim stage where wages have been sunk into projects that haven't yet been delivered, will those kind of intricacies be transferred across as well?
With regard to your first question, I think, can I suggest that would be a more productive conversation when we've got the contractor and consultant breakdowns for next time around, and we can talk more about why or why not we couldn't have predicted this or forecast this in advance.
I'm happy with that.
And with regard to the second question, I'm going to pass that to Amanda.
Amanda, have a bit of a crack at some of these, and then I'll chip in if I need to.
Yeah, well, I agree. It'll be easier to have that conversation. We've got the breakdown by project and can see all the overs and unders, but it's kind of a bit of both. So obviously, like a waters contract, you don't want to hire staff, or we're having trouble hiring staff. So we've got vacancies, and so then we're using contractors, and then the way like inflation and market issues getting people. So you're paying that higher cost for the consultants. So obviously when we lose water, we lose that as well. So I think once we see at the individual contract level and exactly where the vacancies are and how they've been filled in the interim, that'll all make sense, if that answers.
So if we have vacancies though, why are the personnel costs slightly above budget? Like there's an explanation there around book entries to, like in relation to capital projects that haven't occurred, but is that solely the reason, or are there other pressures in that line as well?
I think there's definitely other pressures in that line to recruit people, so you're having to pay a little bit more to get them here. But yeah, it's kind of an area that's still to be worked in, because we haven't finished all the capitalisation as we go through on a line by line and work out for the contracts, what's capital and what's not. So that could move slightly in that area as well.
And you've also got the comment in there with regard to the sports centre and the fact that because it's not getting built, we can't capitalise against that.
Yeah, so all costs that we'd budgeted for staff to use working on that as like employees, not consultants, that would have gone to the balance sheet. But that's had to just be absorbed because we still have to pay them their contract. So that's just hit the bottom line, came off there.
So that would be what, one FTE, or how many?
I have no idea. We'd have to look. That might come out when we look more into the contract level. It would be percentages of individual FTEs. I'm not sure how many in total it would come to, but a few different people working for a percentage of the time on it.
I guess I'm just trying to, we've got vacancies and then there's capital projects that haven't occurred, so that as we've just confirmed, but yeah, so where's the rest of the variance coming from in there? Like for instance, as another large chunk of that, the 10 million of capital projects delivered versus 35 million, for example. Or I'm just trying to understand.
Are you still talking about personnel costs?
Yes.
So the personnel cost difference between budget and actual of around about 700,000.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about water in particular, because I think that's probably this is easy to explain. It is. But essentially, at $35 million, there would have been, say, 5 or 6 FTEs dedicated to delivering those projects. What has, so that they're recognised in the project rather than in the REM line. Because that hasn't taken place. You say, oh, well, there were some vacancies, but actually a lot of that resource has been redeployed into other things. In particular, I've said a lot of that has actually been in relation to addressing the information requests from the NTU in relation to the Three Waters transition. So essentially we've gone from spending it as a capital expense to spending it as an operational expense responding to the information request. Some of that's been funded with the some of the transitional funding, but we certainly put a lot more effort into that than we are getting compensated for by the entity. So it's like, and we didn't really, and when we set the budgets and set out the work program, we didn't really have any idea of the amount of resource we would need to put into that space. So it's, we created space by not doing those projects, but it's been completely absorbed and therefore became in an operational expense and therefore appearing above the line rather than being capitalised into a project. So that's one area of, I think, and probably by far the most significant in terms of where we expected the effort to go and the way we budgeted it and where the actual effort has gone, and so the cost that has been incurred. So yes, there have been vacancies. If we hadn't had those, we'd be reporting an even greater variance in the personnel space, because we've had to do more focus on operational things rather than capital projects, and that's the big thing that it's reflecting.
I think when we can come back to the PAR with a better breakdown of where our vacancies sit, where our contractors and consultants have been utilised over the past while, we'll be able to have a really productive discussion on that. And so if it's okay, and I'm conscious of the time, are there any further questions?
I think there is one other matter, and it's a sort of an issue that I'll just call it Amanda rather than Ms. Nichols. That sort of highlighted on her arrival. It's like, we're not, I think we could do a far better job of recording decisions that council makes during the year that have a budgetary impact, and reflecting those in the budget we're actually reporting against during the year. So like one of the biggest, by far the biggest variation in the consultant space is in relation to transformation. That was a decision made after the start of the financial year. So it was very clear council made the decision to spend to put extra funding and extra resource into that space. You're seeing that as a significant contribution to the consultation, the consultant line that we're not capturing at the moment. So it's like, so we end up sort of explaining it every time we produce the report because we haven't adjusted the budget to reflect decisions that you've made. So it's like, well, we need to, and we're working on developing a better system to have more of a, not calling a living budget, so that we're reporting against it and a really good track of, right, these are the decisions that council has made during the financial year that have a financial impact, have a budgetary impact. So you can see those. So it's like, well, rather than, so we're not just explaining the same things over and over again. It's clear that this is a specific decision, this is the consequence, but it's actually understood and allowed for.
So we'll work on it. We'll work on introducing a component that, for want of a better phrase, we could call, approved variance to budget and unapproved variance to budget.
Yeah.
Okay, look, thank you. And thank you, Amanda, for all the hard work you've put into the improvements already in the reporting. I think some of the explanations and the breakdowns are really, really good. On that basis, could I please ask for somebody to move that PAR accepts and receives? Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Blackler. Thank you. Put the motion to the meeting, please. All those in favour? Against? Motion carried. Thank you. And now, Councillor McCone, we move to agenda item 5.2, Treasury Report for Q4 FY 2023. And again, Amanda or Paul, who'd like to speak to this?
Okay, so this is the standard report you receive each quarter. This is talking about the full year to 30 June 2023. I've tried to present it with totals so you can see the offsetting positives and negatives. So the positive side, the cash that we've got on hand, term deposits, investments in other entities, loans to other entities, investments in Amarama Airfield, and investments in the CCOs. And then the other side of the balance sheet, we've got the borrowing, which is all pretty much from our GFA now. So overall, I feel the balance sheet's looking pretty good, in a sound position. We've got extra 4.2 borrowed from LGFA than we had budgeted, but you can see that's just sitting in cash at hand at 30 June as well. So there's another $3.6 million higher than budget sitting in cash, so it kind of offsets each other. And then the remaining balance of that is the on-lending 1.4 loans to external entities, which most of that was Waitaki District Health Services. And then the net position, if you look at all the positives minus the lending from our GFA, we're sitting at a net position of 5.2 positive, higher than borrowing, and that's $1 million higher than expected. And in terms of returns, if you look at the average cost of borrowing, it was 3.15. So that's our interest cost on the borrowing from our GFA principally. And then our return on investments is slightly higher at 3.5%. So that's a summarised version of the results till 30 June for the year. And then there's more detail behind.
Councillor Mackay.
Just a quick question, Amanda. So you're 14 million in brackets. Is that just a financial position of cash flow over the last few years? Can you explain that figure, please? Or that right-hand column?
Variance prior to prior year, the 14.367.
Yeah, so that means the net, the investments, cash and investments, less the debt, means we are $14 million lower than where we were previously. So basically more borrowings.
Which to a large degree is the difference between your total borrowings of 42.2 and previous year of 25.
Yeah, so we're up 17 mil higher borrowings, offset by 2.8 on lent out.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I'll ask the question now, but I was going to ask it a bit later with regard to the various loans. that we have with LGFA. I just want to be clear in my own mind, and forgive me if this is a naive question, but the words effective interest rate, I was sort of looking for an average interest rate and I couldn't find one anywhere, and I came across the effective rate. Does that mean that basically what you've done is the effective interest rate the actual cost of every dollar borrowed? In other words, if you look at the total amount of money we've borrowed from LGFA and then look at the various rates and terms, and some are 6 and some are 0.4 and so on, do the 3 words effective interest rate mean that basically every dollar we borrowed from them is costing us 3.15%? Is that what that says?
That's correct.
So effective rate, average rate, it's like interchangeable terms.
Are they? Okay.
Well, for the purpose of this, I think the really important thing that Amanda referred to before was that, you know, every dollar that we borrow effectively costs us 3.15%,
Yes.
and every dollar that we're lending out, we're earning 3.5% on.
Oh, yes, no, I get that. Yes. I just wanted to be clear in my own mind what effective meant relative to average, and you've clarified that as well, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so the effective is just taking the interest cost, total interest cost for the year divided by the average borrowing that we've had for the year.
Thank you. And are there any further questions from the floor? No? Yeah, if not, could I please ask for somebody to move the motion? Councillor Ryan and seconder. Councillor McCone. Thank you. So on that basis, I'll ask to move the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. Thank you. That now brings us on to agenda item 6. Agenda item 6 is for us to pass the motion to move into the public excluded session. Before we do that, I would like to thank all those present in the public gallery and watching the live stream for their participation. Could I please ask for a mover and a seconder to move to public excluded? Mover, Councillor Blackler, seconder, Councillor Ryan. That put the motion to the meeting. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. Motion carried. We'll now have a short pause while we move into public excluded.